night, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our walkthrough of Robert B. Davis II's book, Purpose in Form, The Necessary Basis of All Ethics. This chapter is fairly self-explanatory. It is titled Conclusion, and I think that we can kind of gather what entails within. But before we kind of jump out the gate, I did want to put a note here and say that that the direction of the conclusion is directly tied in with the last statement, one of the last statements that you made in the prior chapter, and that is love is the only effective approach for reaching full embodiment, full incarnation. So Rob, if you could take it from here.
Yeah, so it picks up off the conclusion of the last chapter, which sort of had a poetic note to it, and sort of squashes that and says, okay, let's be a little bit analytical, as is the sort of the purpose of the book. So the idea is looking at what the overalls and what it means to what it means by living in love, or that love is the whatever supreme effective power in the world. Um, and I talk about sort of the different ways that you could conceive of that and just saying, oh, just feel the love, man. Like it's all love, brother. It's all good, that's not really helpful in the particulars. And so I try to get a little bit more particular and talk about what it means. And I state that love is not something that breaks the game. It doesn't make the difficulties of the world go away. It's actually the foundation upon which the difficult world is built. So it really just means it's really just about building that baseline faith, which is the attitude that you then take to the world full of problems and difficulties. So um, it's more of an assistance in persevering than a uh, particular solution to every problem, though it does um, put you on the way to the solutions. Um, so, and then I talk about the idea of, or the seeming conflicting idea of the sort of Eastern and or modern New Age idea of, oh, just be yourself, be totally you, don't judge, just sort of let it all go, and the universe just wants whatever you want, versus the other side of being called to grow and progress and change and develop virtue. And I try to tie those together in a counterintuitive way, I think, but I hope ultimately an effective way.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up with because I think it also ties in with the chapter on tolerance in that, if there is no judgment, if everything is just kind of that sense of love where anything go, see, I think that almost because the message is true, right? Love is the answer.
Yeah.
But the concept of love is a very difficult one to kind of break down, right? I think it was the Greeks that had multiple different words for expressing different forms of love.
Mhm.
And so I think that when we to make a comparison, when it's like, hey, just be you, just it's almost like do as thou wilt, in
Yeah.
that and that's a complete misconception. And I think that that's an aspect, a strong aspect of the New Age movement that actually ties directly in with Satanism in the sense where, you almost view God as being like this neutral, etherical force that bends to your will. Um, if you want a cheese pizza and you're on the couch, then hey, somebody's gonna knock on the door with a cheese pizza just because you thought about it.
Mhm.
When there's that level of, like you said, a calling, right? There's that connection of somebody tapping you on the shoulder, and then you have to turn around and look and see who it is. And that is the narrow path, and that is a difficult path. And I think a lot of that path, the difficulty in that path is because it requires an absolute pure form of love, and again, it's hard. It's a really hard one to really set as an example when you say that, because love is fairly abstract. It's like, well, what form of love are we referring to? But it's that turn the other cheek kind of love. It's that um it's the meek shall inherit the earth, is what I think. It's the type of love that is unburdened by what has been, and that what has beening is the environment, is just your external environment that is consistently pounding into you, but regardless of what's going on, you have to have you have to have oil in your lamp. You got to have that flame coming up regardless of what's hitting you, and that can be extremely difficult because we get completely lost in the external, and we lose that sense of self. But and I'll pass this on to you, and I don't say this in a selfish way, but that love, and I'll kind of add to this later, but that love originates from self, not in an egoic, prideful way, but because the kingdom of God is within. You are the temple, and so if you're looking for love, that's why you can never find it in that car or that person or that whatever object. It all starts from within, and that is then reflected. That projection of love is then reflected back to us from our external environment. And I think then that is an aspect of the New Age movement that I think that they get, at least to some extent, correctly. But nonetheless, I digress, and I pass it on to you, sir.
So, a couple of points on the idea of like, well, love and do as well. Actually, the Christian idea is love and do as you will, not just do as thou wilt. But on the idea of do as you will because love allows you to do whatever you want, that idea is like, well, God loves you so much, so he doesn't care whether you fill in the blank. Um, but I think if you just restate that in another way, like it becomes obvious what is actually being said. God loves you, he just doesn't care about anything you do. Like, well, actually, then he doesn't love you. He's indifferent towards you, right? Um, so the the idea of love is that paternal love, where you say, um, there are actually things that I'm not going to allow you to do. There are things that I'm going to steer you away from and try to get you to go in a way that's actually good for you. So there's an order to love, there's an order to the world, and so there's a way that we need to interact with the world. And then because God loves us and loves people around us and the world, he wants us to act in certain ways that reflect that in the world, not just, oh, I love you so much, you know, do whatever you want. Like poop in the trash can, tear down the walls, like light your house on fire. It's all good. You're just having fun. You're experimenting. You're being creative. And it's like, no, there's an order, and there's form, there's purpose in form. So um, that means that love has a certain order and directedness, and isn't indifferent. Love is not indifferent to your state and your trajectory. So I think that sort of resolves the idea of non-judgment and non what indifference of love. Just infinitely permissive love is indifferent love, and not love. And then on the idea of self and the love starting within, I think there's a lot of experiential reality that I think people go through that where they are looking for something outside and they're missing something within, and then because they're missing something within, they're never going to be satisfied with what's outside. Um, but I think I've moved away from the of talking about like the capital S self, the idea of the higher self or whatever it is. I think just choosing the term self was a mistake whenever that happened because it just causes a lot of issues. Like we had the term God, we can just say God. Um, but the and I was actually just reading that uh, in an introduction to a book of Eastern philosophy, they were using the word self to translate Atman, which is sort of like the tradition that had developed. And they were saying, since we've done this already, this is what we're going to do. We're going to call it self. But the term in the East, at least in Hindu, the term Atman does not mean self. So it doesn't have the same connotations as they chose there. So it's interesting that I don't know how that first originated, but I think it causes problems because you're like, oh, myself, well, that's me. But then when you're talking about your higher self, you're not talking about me because those there's just going to be some conflation and it's gonna cause issues. So um and that's why you had to clarify and say, well, I'm not saying this from an egoic sense. So I would say uh I think the traditional answer is just better. We can love and love in the world and perform the turn your other cheek and uh, the meekness in the world because God loved us first, because God's love initiated, because God's love reached out to us, that was bestowed and extended. And the idea of self sort of misses that because while yes, it's not external, it's also not intrinsic to yourself, right? It's something. Love pre-exists. That's part of the first part. Love is the foundation of the game. So we don't create love, and we don't conjure love or reinvent love. Like love is there and is given and reaches out to us, and then, um, but it usually is an internal process. We commune with that and share in that, and then go out. So I find that some of those caveats just fall away as we abandon the new age words as well, even though some of the experience of what they're trying to talk about is true. Um, it actually just works better to say God is love and God loved us first, and finding God within, then we uh, can find him without. So,
I think that's, and I think that's just a nature of difficulty within trying to express this stuff with language, right? It's like so the love of God is always there, right? When we say it's within, it's but it's when we right, it's whenever consciousness is focused and has identified that love, right? Because if it's always there, if we're running around in a depressed, it's like, even though it's cloudy, the sun's always out. We might be in a rut, and in a depressed state because we're not focusing on that infinite presence of God, which is love within, and it's
mhm,
only when we misdirect that focus, that attention through distraction, through whatever, that we lose sight of that presence, but it's always there. Um, and so it's like it's not a self-cultivating love, right? It's not like you're generating it yourself from
mhm,
going within. It's just you are reframing your focus and your attention onto it, you know,
mhm,
wherever it is. I mean, if we're saying, even if conscious is non-local, then maybe that's an aspect as well that's non-local. So we're having something that is non-local, which is our consciousness, identify something which is also non-local, but
Hmm.
nonetheless, they reside both within us, to an extent, because we're experiencing that, to some degree with our bodies. Um, so I kind of want to delve into this a little more here. And I don't mean to skip around, okay? But I do want to kind of jump to Deutsch, because I think it's a really strong point that you make here. You kind of reframe uh
Oh, yes.
yeah, okay, so it says the truths Deutsch emphasizes so greatly, inserting a large graphic image of each carven into a stone plaque. One, he's saying that problems are inevitable, and two, problems are soluble. Um, and I think that as I pass it off to you, this is kind of a reframing or a different way to look at the problems that we face, at the different things. Where is the opportunity within the problem? Because if we're looking at a failure, or we're looking at some sort of an obstacle as a roadblock, yes, in a sense it is, but it's also a challenge, right? And those can be viewed as opportunities. So yeah, if you could kind of expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed David Deutsch's book, The Beginning of Infinity. And he takes time and space in his book to say, here are sort of like the foundational truths of life. And he makes a little graphic and like blocks them off as though they're carven in stone. And his first one is problems are inevitable and problems are soluble. And this is all within the context of um, a book that's written completely secularly. And the idea of the scientific method and the scientific pursuit. And this is part of my answer to reframing the idea of what is the self, and to sort of resolve that idea of, well, do I, am I just sort of, do I need to just be me? Why can't I just be me and be what I am? Versus why do I have to go and do stuff and work and progress and grow and be pruned and etc. So the idea that I'm getting across there is that those are the same, because what we are things that progress. We are a progressive thing. We are a being going from A to B, going in motion, goal directed, quest oriented, whatever you might say. So we are a developing, moving being. So being who we are is being someone who has goals and does things. Um, Being who we are is not just sitting on a couch and eating potato chips. Um, Now, you might find someone who's in a state of like spiritual bliss, and they might not do very much externally, but they also don't sit around and eat potato chips. So it's like there's something else going on there than just, oh, because the monks like to sit around and do nothing, therefore I, as a layperson, my real state is sitting around eating Jello and potato chips. Like that is not a logical sequence there. So anyhow, I take another look at these ideas of scientific progress, of confronting problems in the world, and the reality that we can solve problems. Problems are inevitable and problems are soluble. That's what he said. And what something I realized while I was writing this and while I was reading that book, is that this is this sounds very modern, very scientific, very progressive, very Enlightenment-esque, but really that's just done through the choice of words that he used. And the same message is the same message that has always been there. And so in this concluding section, I show the underlying message. So problems are inevitable, uh, is simply another way to say adventure is out there, because every problem is a purpose. So we've already gone through the whole book and shown that purpose is inevitable, purpose is infinite, meaning is infinite. So any problem is a potential purpose. Um, and so that means that when we look out and we see problems are inevitable, that means we see purpose and quests calling to us are inevitable all around. So adventure is out there. And then number two, in his words, is problems are soluble. We can solve problems. And that one easily transfers over to you are a potential hero because you have these quests beckoning and they are soluble, they are completable. We can resolve problems. Well, that's what a hero does, goes out and solves problems. So, just by changing, keeping the same meaning, but just changing the framing of the words, you get uh, the basic foundations of the scientific enterprise is a what a delightful RPG, like a world full of adventure, and you could be the hero engaging in it. So I think that was revealing for me just to see because as far as I know, Deutsch didn't intend that at all and didn't necessarily see the connection. He seems to have been forwarding what he thought was very modern sciency conclusions and dictums, but it turns out it's the same thing that it's always been is uh, that life is there for the journey, for the quest. We are the thing that what we are is a being on a quest, and uh, there is hope because the world's not a haphazard thing that is thrown together and put a bunch of quests that aren't suited to your level right in front of you. I mean, you might confront quests that aren't suited to your level, but that's just a question of wisdom and discernment. There are quests in the world that are suited to your level, and those are the ones that you're called to do and progress through those until you get to the higher ones and not just go jump into the higher ones immediately. That's just part of wisdom. So the fact is that the world is structured in a way that is amenable to you succeeding and being a worthy, true hero, um, despite the fact that it is very difficult. Those are, again, one and the same. They're not actually contradictory. Having a very difficult life is the thing that would uh, calls forth the great hero.
Yeah, there's a few points that I have on that. One is, when you brought up the RPG, and I remember back in the day, uh, I would dabble a little bit in the old Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, any of
Mm-hmm.
those games. And it was kind of interesting. I remember specifically playing the game and trying to be like an NPC, like drive, in the lines in the speed of traffic, stop at the stoplights, and then though when you're doing that, there's that itch, there's that rash, man, where there's a mission, you gotta go like, rob the bank, but you are driving around not doing anything, or you could be doing something absolutely, but I think that kind of describes that self-imposed limitation where, there's that calling of like, hey, it's time to be a hero, let's go step forth. And it's like, well, I don't want to, I'll stay on the couch and eat potato chips, and maybe, why don't you come sit on the couch with me and we'll eat potato chips together. uh but it's, so there's that, and I also, what comes to mind is Jonah, right? Jonah, when God's like, hey man, like you got to go to Nineveh and you got to tell them that they're acting kind of not in a good way, and if they don't turn their ways around, I'm gonna take them out. And Jonah's like, man, I don't want to do that. I'm not gonna do that. And he's like, and God said, fine, because you're not doing that, you're going in a whale, okay, for a few days until you finally do it. And so, like you said, it follows us around like that, like if we're not on the path, I don't know if you've ever seen a Game of Thrones, but when Cersei Lannister was walking down the through King's Landing, there was a woman behind her with a bell yelling, "Shame, shame." And it's like if you're not on your path, if you're on the couch eating potato chips, you know, God's there. Shame, shame, what are you doing? Why aren't you getting up? Um, and that's the path that leads us to that is meaning and purpose, right? And so you also allude in the chapter just a page prior, I believe it is, we're talking about identifying that already pre-existing love that was built in you, that identification. Okay, well, how do you do that if we're talking about an absolutely distracted world or environments just, drawing our attention in? Well, as simple as it sounds, I think that it is at least from my understanding, uh one of the most effective ways, and that is meditation. And I use that term lightly because in my opinion, prayer is within there. They are separate, right? But nonetheless, you are being still and knowing that I am God, right? There's that act of stillness, of quiet, so that the Lord can speak through to you. And then from that, then you get your mission, then you get your statement, it's like, hey, time to stop driving the speed traffic and stopping at the red lights, and it's time to go, hopefully not rob a bank. I don't think God's going to tell you to rob a bank, but that was an example.
Yeah, well, no, and that'll be a good one to build off of. So, because the idea is right, and I think it's one that people are familiar with. That the like, okay, you're trying to play Grand Theft Auto, and like you're gonna just drive the speed limit and stop at the stoplights like that. Then you're bored, and it's like, okay, well, I know there's something more. Okay, well, that game is not set up for there to be something more on the good side, right? There's not like, oh, I pull over and help the old lady across the street. It's like I pull over and I smash the old lady with a bat, like because why not? And then I get some money. And so that that's the disconnect there. But I mean, unfortunately, there are times and places in the world where that is how human life has been, where it's like we have somewhat of a structure going, but all of our human structure is like funneling us in the wrong direction, where it's like, yeah, you're bored, and there's all this opportunity over here, go that way, do that, when really we need to be going in the other direction. Uh, but thankfully, in a lot, a lot more of modern, but not contemporary societies, isn't just strictly that of being 100% going in that way. There are those opportunities that open up where it's like, yes, you have more to do than just be an NPC. But what's sort of counterintuitive or interesting is that, part of God's purpose in your life and part of the goodness of God, the depth of God, the infinity of purpose, like part of that is driving the speed limit. Like doing the small good things that an NPC would do, whatever, stopping at the stoplights are actually significantly good purposes because they are allowing society to continue and for people to move in good directions and whatnot. And then on top of that, you can pull over and help the person broken down on the road, and you can, um, you know, go to your job hopefully and help people out, and you can help a neighbor on the weekend and etc. And so those sound like simple, boring things, and when you think of them in the nature of a video game, Like, why am I sitting down in my spare time to do these weird little small, like you wouldn't do it in a video game because the point of the video game is to get an intense dopamine kick. Um, and you're not going to get that from second person uh, good deeds with meaningless NPCs. But in the real world, when you do those things, you actually do get those rewards because those people across from you are not meaningless NPCs. They are images of God and purposeful beings with dignity and divinity about them. So as you go around and do the boring things, that actually is a rewarding quest line, even if it um, doesn't involve anything beyond that. So just a little bit of a difference in the frame shift and that the video games that we play, especially ones like that, it's like you are shuttled into the direction of chaos and evil because that's why people play those games is they want to have that sort of exciting side of the experience. But it does show us that there's that purpose and that calling to more, and that's real and that's out there, and just we can be thankful that there are that the game of life is set up in such a way that there are beneficial purposes calling to you, not just the rob a bank quest line or the chaos quest line.
Right, right. It wasn't, I mean, the analogy wasn't necessarily revolving around the morality of like the game or the actions. It was more so, breaking out of the self-imposed limitations, right? It's being in the world, not of the world. It's
Right.
all like that's a program, right? The players in that game, the NPCs, and it's not saying get out and do something absolutely bonkers. And like you're saying, you do have to do a lot of the mundane things. That's an aspect of being human, of being within this construct. Is this limited construct is sometimes you have to do those types of, all the most of the time you have to do those things, I mean, most of the time. But it's where is your attention focusing? Is your attention on staring at a wall, drifting off to space, or are you helping old ladies cross the street? It's and then are those actions going to open doors for further action opportunities and things just kind of open up in that sense? But it is more so in the idea of imposing self limitations. And I know that we talked about the sense of well, when we're using the term self, but it's by not identifying with God, by not acknowledging that presence, you are stopping at the stop signs, driving the
Right, right. Yeah, totally.
blah 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 blah. But when you're oriented and you see it, it's like, boom, okay, now we're living. A lot of people, and I think we've talked about this, they view life as a curse, as a limitation. It's like, this is this is this flesh vessel that, this flesh vessel that I have been cursed with. Why have you cursed me with this? Uh, and it's a total shift in mindset, right? And that's all it is. You might have one guy that says, wow, life is incredible. I can see a sunset. I sit in an awesome chair. I've got a dog, listing off all the things that you're grateful for and all of the experiences that you're having due to the limited construct, right? Because if you are infinite and you're not having the limited construct, you can't necessarily engage in that experience of appreciating your dog or loving or really doing any of that, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but then on the other token, you have people, and that's where the meaning and purpose comes in, or the lack thereof, that do view this as like a hell realm, and that I think is a shift that a lot of people are having difficulty making. And I will say that I think a lot of that boils down to the fact that, people people are completely I don't want to say immersed, because when we immerse with the external, we get into a state of flow, right? But
Right.
it's not that. It's I don't know, it's this mundane way of life that
It's called acedia, actually.
acedia, that sounds, that acedia, actually, that sounds like a pretty cool name or term, but it's not for something cool or neat.
Yeah. It's the other term for sloth.
For sloth.
It was funny. I was actually just looking at some of this stuff the other day, just giving myself a little bit of a refresher on the idea of sloth. And so basically, it's not one and the same as just sitting around and being lazy. It's more like the the inability to do what you're supposed to do. And even on the most basic level, what you're supposed to do is to lovingly engage with the world. And so the basis of sloth is lacking loving engagement. And this really ties into what we're talking about because that's sort of part of my point and something I write more about elsewhere. But the the whole basis for whether it's meditation or prayer or really anything else, but especially those two, it gets obvious. The whole basis for the practice of meditation is not this like gritty discipline of forced um, stationariness. The basis for true meditation is abounding love, being loving, being extremely interested and fascinated is the way to be focused in meditation. If you have a loving, calm, fulfilled consciousness, it can apply itself. It can open up to anything and stay on that thing. Uh, Whereas when you have a disrupted, anxious consciousness, you can't ever focus on a thing because there's always something else that you need to get. It's a satisfied, fulfilled consciousness that is steady. So this idea of acedia or sloth is uh, so there's the seven, right? Yeah, the seven deadly sins, and the other six are different kinds of misapplied love. So like wrath is like I really love justice and I love, myself or whoever I'm protecting, and I love the idea of this other person not doing what they were doing before. And because you love those things so much, you end up sinning against them because um, you've misapplied your love. Your love hasn't considered them in the appropriate way. Um, or envy. You love what someone else has, so much so that you're motivated to take it from them and hate them for having it. But nevertheless, it's motivated by love for something of God's creation, which in its basis is appropriate. So all the other sins are misapplications of love, and in some cases having too much love that oversteps certain bounds. But sloth is the one that is not about a misapplication of love. It's actually a defect in love. It's about not having enough love because it means basically it's that state of looking at life as a curse. Even if you're not actually sitting there thinking, oh, life is such a curse, when you sit there and you're like, I guess I could eat some Pop-Tarts, but then I'd have to get up. Maybe I'll it's like you're living in a world of infinite purpose and love and light and crazy mystical experience all the time, and yet you're bored. Like that, there's something wrong with that. And that's the sloth side, is that there's part of you is disconnected and living improperly, unfaithfully, unlovingly in the world. So this really ties in with that. And part of the solution is, well, the love that you need is actually there. It's a given. It's necessary. It's all surrounding. It's all saturating. So you don't have to create it yourself. That's the good news. The bad news is you have to abandon the self that you think you are that is defective in love, which isn't actually bad news in the end, but it's not pleasant when you are sitting in it because that part of that slothful part of you has to die. So sort of comes full circle with what we were saying. And I'll read this poem that I included there that was moving for me, and I thought captured this whole idea very well. It's by Rabindranath Tagore. I slept and dreamt that life was a joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was a joy.
Yeah. It's like what comes to mind with that is the necessity to embody, right? Where if you want to experience, from what I'm interpreting from this poem is, if you want to experience joy, if you want to experience that joy, the the material expression of that is service. And so by acting in service, you are then experiencing joy. But in order to experience that, you have to embody servitude. And I think that's what a lot, from getting the results that you're looking for, or whatever the case may be, it's not a sense of somebody coming up to you and saying, "Hey, this is what you are," and then, "Oh, that's right, that's what I am." It's an active embodiment. It's like, when you are, for a lack of a better term, if you are self actualizing and you have this image of this version of yourself that you see, uh, and you want to get there, well, in order to properly embody that, you have to do those things that version of you does now. And it has to be now because it's all there is, right? And so you have to let those things fall off that are no longer serving you, and you have to start acting in the ways that would be that are that version of yourself. Or if you want to experience joy, if that is an emotion or a state of being, of existence that you want to embody, yes, I mean, technically you could just embody it, right? But as things are, there has to be almost a material expression or action then that produces that, almost, right? Like you could, okay, you could just sit on the couch and get to a point of bliss and pure joy. That happens. But that act of embodying, that act of service, that act of, if I want to be uh somebody that is jacked and going to the gym every day, if I want to be that, you have to start going to the gym every day. You have to at least get into the parking lot, if you're not going to go in. But doing those acts of embodiment. And so that takes, like we're saying, like you were referring to Deutsch here, that takes the fact that the problems are inevitable, right? You have to act, you have to engage in life, and an act of engagement is embodiment. And so I think the beauty of the story of Jesus Christ is he provides that example of that, he provides that North Star. You see those actions, you read the words, that then becomes a part of you, you know, and then you have to act it out. You have to then start embodying those things. And, again, without that North Star of Jesus Christ, that embodiment of Christ, of God in human form, we don't have that ability to really see that. There isn't that conceptualization. We can't, it's just not as intimate, and I think that word is really key. I feel is intimacy. That's an aspect of love, right? But then that involves you to be engaged. You have to, it's almost like you're a part, not saying, you're like in the world, not a part of it, but you have to be intimate with the thing. There has to be that connectivity. And so that cessation of connectivity, that feeling of repulsion from the world, that feeling of, I don't belong here. It was a mistake that I was even
Right.
here. That is, I mean, it's hard to put into words, but it just seems like that is the anti-embodiment. That is
Yep.
like saying, I'm not even going to play the game. I forfeit the role. I'm done. And tying that in with sloth, and what was the other term? What was it?
Acedia
Acedia.
or acedia, something like that.
You know, it almost seems like acedia or acedia is worse in a sense, right? Because I think that sloth, you can almost apply a sense of ignorance with sloth, with being slothful,
The
right?
way
But
we interpret it, yeah.
right, with the way that we interpret it.
Mm.
But the other one is knowing. It's like I know what I'm supposed to do, but I just can't, I'm just not doing it. And that compounds over time. I mean, there's been, well, I mean, I remember a day, where I wasn't connected with God, and I was in the world, or I was of the world, and I was just doing all sorts of dumb stuff, as most people do in their 20s. They got to touch the stove to see if it's hot.
Yeah.
But then it comes to a point to where, you do connect with the Lord, and you do have that firm tether, and you're going to put your hand on the stovetop, and God's like, hey, that's hot. How many times we got to go through this? And you're just like, boom. But that one hurts the most because there's no grace. It's like, we alluded to this earlier on in the discussion, and I'll pass it over, but that paternal love of God. Then when you look at that, then we are the child. And so when a child, goes out into the middle of the road or does something, you typically don't scold him. You bring him back. You bring him back, because you have to allot for that level of ignorance. But the more and more that kid knows exactly what they're doing, the less tolerant you're going to be of that kind of behavior.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Just a thought on the person who's, just overcome by bliss sitting, in meditation or whatever it is. I think um, that's still a very active state, is my belief. Not speaking 100% from personal knowledge, but I don't think it's a state of just sitting there being like, I am wonderful. And wonderful feelings just flow out of me all the time because I'm so wonderful. It's more like um, being, it's more like being in a state of revelation of like, wow, the wonders of God are just popping out at me and exploding before me. And you're in a reciprocal state of saying, yes, how wonderful. Yes, God bless that. Yes. Oh, that, the vision of the person who, you had some issue with in the past pops before your eyes, and God gives you an insight into how he's led them through that and how you're both better people now. And you say, oh, thank God for that. And so you're in an active state of affirming the goodness of the world and sort of pouring back into the joy. And so I think it's more active than people think when the person's just sitting there and they just get bliss poured on them. I think it's a reciprocal thing. And it would be a fairly active state. that's somewhat speculation, but I've had some glimpses of things like that, and that's my understanding of it. Um, so did we want to, unless you had something else on that, do we want to go into a bit on the atonement?
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that would be a good opportunity to go with that, and that was good clarification because that would be an like active meditation, right? Because you're still present, you're still centering your focus. You're
mhm.
not just melting, so to speak. It is active.
Or if you're melting, you're consenting to the melting. You're affirming the melting and
That's correct.
refusing to crystallize again,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Um, so I think that's a good segue into the epilogue Atonement, because and I'll start this off before we actually get into the meat and potatoes of it here. I never really see this in a book, um, and especially one, it's an opinionated book. You
Yeah.
are providing the truth, and so you use a bunch of different people to say, okay, like if you look here, this isn't the truth. If you look here, this is the truth. And I think that what can get lost in that is we point somebody out and says, okay, this is falsehood.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that everything that person says is false. And I
Right.
think that's something that because we have we're so polarized and we have such we're living in an echo chamber. The second we hear that somebody has a different point of view than us, we shut them off and we think that they're the worst person in the world because they don't see the world as we do. And I know there's one person in particular here, that I have quite a few disagreements with, but nonetheless, um, I agree with what you say about this individual in terms of some of the positive things that they've said, and I think that's something that we need to really look at, and it's difficult at times because it does take a level of humility. It takes a level of being able to look at things objectively and think critically. And then it kind of eases the air. It brings people back to reality rather than this, let's bring out the pitchfork and and run and chase people down. It's like, it humanizes again. And I think that's really important, especially when we're discussing the topic of love. In Even though we're painting, you are painting somebody in a specific light in the book based off of the contents within the book, you are sure that nonetheless you are extending that olive branch. You are showing love to your fellow human by painting them as being human.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's definitely the goal here. So I included this section because I knew it was, an opinionated book, and I've had my experiences with listening to or reading opinionated things, uh, and I try to see as many sides of th as I can, and it can be very frustrating. And I've also had many experiences of someone who I like and agree with, and they either, you know, say something great about this person over here, or say something terrible about this person over here, and I go look at either of those, and it's like, okay, well, I see some of what you said, but I also see stuff that I don't like, or here I see why you don't like them, but there's some good stuff in there. So, so yeah, that was my goal, is just to have that sort of cap on the end of the book of, we're talking about ideas and we're speculating on ideas and we're trying to figure out ideas. We're not uh, on teams battling people. And I mean, that is the goal of thought, is that we let our ideas die in our place. So if we're focused on destroying ideas, destroy ideas with facts and logic, well, you destroy the ideas, you don't destroy the people, right? And hopefully, the goal is that you destroy their ideas so that they can live a better life. Like if you actually do it well, if you actually are um, getting to the truth and you are able to share that with them, then that is a good for them. So you are actually trying to do good for them. And then so on. I think also it, as you sort of alluded to, it hopefully makes it go down a little bit smoother and opens the door for those people to be like, hey, you are welcome to criticize back for sure, but you're also welcome to take any of this in stride and not engage in this sort of teamsmanship aspect of like, oh, he called me out, therefore I have to call him back out. Just like, I mean, if I made some good points, feel free to jump on my side and be like, oh, thanks for pointing that out. And I'll be like, oh, cool. Thanks for some of the work you did. That reminds me of, I forget what passage it is, but somewhere in the Bible it says, um, if you, it's something like if you rebuke a brother and he repents, or if you rebuke an enemy and he repents, you've gained a brother, something like that. So it's like the people who are your enemies are actually your brothers. And if you get them on your side, like how much the better. Um, so yeah, so I go through and I've got a list, and we won't go through nearly all of them, but I just said, I've really extolled people like David Deutsch, Leo Tolstoy, Douglas Murray, Joseph Campbell, Jordan Peterson, and I think his name is Brad Warner, the guy who translated the Dogen text that I used. Um, and I've derided people like especially Benatar and Harari. And so I take some time to point out things that I think Benatar and Harari did well and agree with on them, and take time to venture some criticisms of Deutsch and Murray and Dr. Peterson and all those figures. So, I don't know, maybe we'll talk about the Harari one. You alluded to that. But I don't know, we can pick a couple out that might be somewhat interesting just to comment on. Um, I'll say with Benatar, I included his biggest piece earlier in the book because he actually appropriately identifies the relationship of purposelessness and God, which is something I've never seen someone do, where people think of purpose and purposelessness as like these opposites, but he's like, well, if God is infinite and God is perfect, he wouldn't have a purpose because purpose implies a lack. And so the fact that he correctly diagnosed that uh, was a good insight, and it was helpful in my argument because that's part of my argument. So having him, a person I'm disagreeing with, already agreeing on this point, that was helpful. So I was able to use his argument in my book, and I was happy to see that he got that, even if it's surprising based on the rest of his work.
Yeah, I was trying to look at that, look specifically for the Harari uh part, but I remember him condoning or him talking about meditation as being something good, right?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, I give him that point. I give him that point. I mean, I still think he's a 007 grade world villain. But hey, you know what? I think that's such a that's really important to find similarities, especially if you're going into a discussion or a conversation or argument, a debate with somebody that you vehemently disagree with.
Right.
At some point, maybe, I would actually say, prior to actually going on to debate or having that discussion, it's good to think of similarities that already exist,
Mhm.
between you two. And we see this in movies and stories all the time. You see heroes and villains. It's like, oh, you like vanilla ice cream? I like vanilla ice cream too.
Yeah.
Just find these commonalities. Um, and I think that that's probably one of the biggest forms to kind of calm the waters. It's almost when somebody comes up and tries to humanize somebody that you're against or that somebody's against you. Oh, you don't want to believe it. Don't tell me any good things about this person because I'm already so set on them being this way, and I can't,
Right.
distract me. Um, and so I think that especially going through COVID, going through these past few years, there are certain individuals that have come to light that, at least from my understanding, being the peasant that I am, I'm not in the rooms with these people. I don't know who they are. And so the picture that at least has been painted for me by people that I would at least moderately trust their opinions and some of the words that I've heard coming out of their mouths, they seem to be very despicable people, people that want to kill other people. And so it would be kind of hard to go to somebody like Bill Gates and say, hey man, like I really like your sweaters. You guys, you got a good taste in sweaters. I like sweaters too. Let's go grab some coffee. You might identify certain qualities within individuals that you can connect with those things, but would you consider that to be kind of a fault if you see somebody like Hitler or somebody that is just so despicable uh that a lot of those things don't even come to account, right? That
Right.
does that make sense where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So no, I think this is a good distinction to make, because this is where it gets difficult. And again, the point of this is about dealing with ideas in the best way possible. And so it can have the added chummy effect of like, hey, we agree on this point, like we can kind of get along and joke for the moment. Um, that's fine, but that also like I'm not going to share a joke with Hitler.
right.
That would be inappropriate. There are people who get to the point where you're like, I mean, well, what is it? Blessed is he who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. Like you don't there are people who are wicked enough that you're not supposed to be comrades with them. You're not supposed to be uh affiliating with them in any shape or form. And being too lenient would be a flaw. But that's about the person. That's about how you're relating to the person. So you're like, okay, this person is like possessed by this ideology. He's done all these terrible things. He wants to do more. Like, keep that person at arm's distance. But if that person, let's say that you are a whatever expert in nuclear physics, and let's just say it's whatever, it's Putin, and Putin's just the worst thing in the world. But he says, I think we need to work on a deal that involves trading uranium or whatever it is so that we can make um, modular nuclear reactors that don't have the ability to be weaponized, that don't have the ability to melt down. That way, we can provide power to people and not increase the risk of nuclear war, whatever it is. Let's say that makes sense. I'm not a nuclear physicist. I don't know if any of that's definitely true or not, but let's just say that he said that, and you, as a nuclear physicist, you're like, actually, that's true. And we don't want nuclear war, yes, and these things actually cannot be weaponized. So, like, why not affirm that idea? And then that does get you the toe in the door of like, hey, I'm a reasonable person. I'm not just against you because you're you. I'm against you because you have crazy bad ideas. That one idea you just had, as far as I can tell, is not crazy bad. Now, obviously you can spin whatever hypothetical off of that pretty easily. But the point is, this is about relating to ideas, right? It is about humanizing people at the same time, but those are two separate things. So you want to be able to engage as rationally as possible and as objectively as possible with ideas, as disconnected from the people as you can. And on a human level, you want to be able to humanize the other people as much as you can, but that exists within reality. And if there is a person who is actually an evil person, while you should regard them as a tragedy and a fallen being and wish for their redemption, that doesn't mean that you pretend like they are a normal, sane, loving person who you just have an average disagreement with. So I think those are two different camps that can coexist, and you can weigh those two things separately.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big one. It's like, a clock is right at least twice a day. Um,
Or let's say
there's a Go ahead.
this just popped into my head, like the reverse situation of like, this person is my friend, but I can look at their ideas and say, hey, man, I don't think you got this one right.
Right.
Right. Like there, if you bleed it too much and you say, well, this person is my friend, so I'm just never going to criticize them, then that's a problem. Um, or even worse, if you say, this person's my friend, therefore I'm going to agree with all of their ideas, like even beyond just criticizing them, just be like, oh, I'm just everything they say is um, wonderful, and I just agree to the best idea. Like that is an inappropriate uh, relationship. I mean, maybe the person knows what they're talking about, but um, if you bleed over on the other side of friendliness, of just, and the person's a good person, so why criticize them? Like, well, actually, in the realm of ideas, the purpose is criticism, conflict, and finding the best one. In the realm of human relations, we relate with people in certain ways based on who they are, and there should be a broad swath of like people that you can relate well with, and uh, then some lines where you can't. But I don't know, that just occurred to me as maybe helping illustrate the issue.
Yeah, the emphasis on the idea, not the person, is a strong one. Like if you, myself, and Harari were in a park, and Harari said, "Hey guys, let's go get some cookies," and you said, "Hey guys, let's go sit on some cacti," I would say, "Harari, you got a good idea. Rob, you don't have a good idea."
Yes.
Though I think that you're an incredible person and that he's a monster, I can say that he has a
Yeah.
good idea and you don't have a good idea,
Right.
and be okay, not just say, Rob, yeah, let's go sit on cacti because you're my best friend and I want to go do what you want to do, and if you want to go sit on cacti, well then, oh well, that's what we're gonna do.
Right. Right.
And that's then falling into the camp of somebody can never do wrong. Uh,
Right.
on the other side, and I think this is so important, and this ties in with it as well, is the manner in which people speak. A lot, oh, I voted for him because he looks presidential, as opposed to, well, what's
Or
going
he
on?
sounds presidential.
Sounds right. He sounds presidential. He says things like, "Let me be clear," and that sounds so good. So it's just it's really important to be looking at the ideas, as don't judge a book by its cover, as we were always taught. It's listen, what's coming out of the mouth, what are the ideas, what is it? Because you might have somebody that you would never expect say the most profound thing in the world. I mean, I remember there was a video I watched not too long ago of somebody going up and asking homeless people some questions. And
Hmm.
you know, most people unfortunately wouldn't give them a second glance. But the words, like some of the stuff that these people were saying, was the most profound. And that's because it's a lot of it's life experience, right? They had to
Hmm.
engage with the world to be able to acquire that wisdom that they share. And that, so again, I come back to that point of I'm in deep agreement with you on the fact that you need, especially in a era of debate or intense discussion, you have to look at the content of what is being discussed rather than the person, fully. I mean, you sure understand maybe where, ways that they're saying things, but fundamentally, I think it's at that point it's the idea. It's the idea,
Hmm.
and we fall trapped to following people simply because they have a badge that says expert. And so
Hmm.
therefore whatever words coming out of their mouths, that's expert that's expert advice, you know? Crazy. Oh, anywho, Um, Rob, was there anything else that you would like to add onto that back end of Atonement?
No, I think that about covers it.
Okay. Um, well, I mean, this concludes the book, Rob, and I mean, I just want
Yeah.
to been an absolute pleasure going through this work. Um, I mean, I remember when you were writing this, several years ago. I mean, there was a part you were writing a part of it. I don't know if it was the entire duration of the book, but I remember that you were working on this book, and it's really good to get into it because it's got not only are you reading a book, but you're reading a book from an author that you personally know. And by doing that, you're also getting to know them better because I mean, this is your idea, this is your work, you know. And then also it just provides an opportunity to delve into a subject matter, into a topic that has not been described in the way that you've described it. I think a lot of the topics in this book would be found in more strictly dogmatic religious texts or
Mm.
new agey, fluffy tree hugging stuff.
Hmm.
But this takes a deep philosophical approach into a topic that is uh, it's right on the fence of being tangible and intangible because of
Mm.
how near and dear it is to people's hearts, right? And so if we're coming in and we're changing that whole where it's a paradigm shift of how you view life, how you view, your placement in the world, the meaning and purpose. These are deep held belief systems that people have. And so if you're coming in and disrupting that, you have to do it in a way that is not only eloquent and deep and complex, but also accessible. And I think that's what this work is here. Um, I know that's what this work is here because I read it. Uh, so I just wanna say thank you, Rob. Thank you for taking the time and sharing this work with us. Um, and then I don't want to, we're not ready to close it out just yet, but I will go ahead and add a plug in here. You can order this book in the link in the description below. You can either go to Amazon.com and go in the search bar and type in Purpose Inform Robert B. Davis II. And that that might be a little hurdle. The easiest way to do it would be to just click on that link in the description. It'll take you right to the page to get the book. And I mean, if you want to have a fantastic time, if you want to get, a deep intellectual massage, this is the way to do it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your effort and all your help you've gone through with this and the recommendations you've given people. And I think the hope is with this podcast that we make it, just a step more accessible because it is philosophical, it is uh, detailed and complex. And so the hope has been that through these discussions, we could make it just a little bit more accessible and just do a step closer to bringing it out to people. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our walkthrough of Robert B. Davis II's book, Purpose Inform, the Necessary Basis of All Ethics. And up next, we're going to be going through Sun Tzu's The Art of War. So please, ladies and gentlemen, look forward to that. Again, if you would like to pick up a copy of Rob's book, Purpose and Form, you can find it on Amazon. There is a link in the description below. You can do it the hard way if you'd like and go to the search bar and type in Purpose and Form Robert B. Davis II, or you can just click on that nifty link down there in the description box. Please feel free to comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what you thought about this and keep it going with Art of War. Rob, thank you very much. Hope you have a great night. Everybody, God bless and may peace be with you.